to introduce Robert from Northern Ireland, who takes LDN for multiple sclerosis. Thank you for joining me, Robert.
It's a pleasure.
Could you tell me when you were diagnosed with MS?
Yes, 1970.
Oh, goodness, you've had it a long time.
I've had it a very long time.
How old were you?
34.
And what were the symptoms at that time that led to your diagnosis?
The two main ones. One is I used to load and unload vans, and I was stripping my trousers off one night, and my wife says, "What have you done to your leg?" And I had scraped the front of my leg from my knee to my foot, and I didn't have a clue. It was bleeding, and I didn't even know.
Goodness.
And shortly after that, it didn't affect the operative nerve.
Right.
It did not affect my operative nerve. It was just a sensatory nerve. And then I noticed that my left eye went slowly completely blind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was then taken into hospital. I was in hospital. In those days, there was very little treatment. And I was taken into hospital under a very good consultant. And he then diagnosed that I had MS.
Mm-hmm. So how did that impact on your life when you got out of hospital? Were you able to carry on?
I was. I have been fortunate for a lot of the time. My eyesight came back reasonably well, although I had scarring in the eye. But as I say, 70% of my problem has been sensatory rather than operative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
yes,
in other words,
yeah.
though I could not necessarily feel my foot, I could drive perfectly well.
Mm-hmm.
It did what I told it to do.
Yes. And
so that was really the main effect. And I mean, I was in my own business, and I managed to stay in my own business. I've only just ceased this year. So, it did impact in that it was very uncomfortable. I have been in a wheelchair quite a few times, but I've normally managed to get by. And now I have to have a wheelchair to go any distance, but I use a relator for getting about the house and for, just getting out of the car and maybe getting into a restaurant or something.
Mm-hmm. So what was your MS like before you started LDN, just before you started? How would you describe
I was noticing I couldn't remember people's names. I couldn't finish sentences. I don't know if that makes sense to you. But
I've got MS, and I suffered the same thing.
You say you've got it yourself. I would be talking to someone about something, and I knew what I wanted to say at the end of a sentence, but I couldn't say. And then I had friends that would come in who I'd known for 20 years, and I would say, "Oh, hello," and I couldn't remember the name.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can honestly say that since I started on this, that has all gone. I now never shut up, as my wife would say.
What other changes have you noticed since you've been on LDN, apart from the cognitive?
Well, it's mainly the cognitive bit. I get terrible spasticity.
Right.
Absolutely desperate. It keeps me awake. And I was on a very high dose of baclofen.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that I could not walk around. I could not get around the house properly. I couldn't step into the car without being helped. And I cut it right back. Now, it does mean that my legs go most of the night, the spasticity. I'm sitting here with one leg jumping around all on its own. But I can get about much better, so I've actually cut back on that. I don't think that the LDN has actually helped any of that, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't noticed any big improvement anywhere else. But it was my own solicitor who suffered with MS, was in the same sort of situation as myself, in the same sort of condition, but he was a man 20 years younger than me, who rang me up and said that he'd been put on to LDN, and he suggested that I get on to my consultant and get onto it, because he said it had made such a difference to him. And that's how I heard about it.
When you first started, did you notice any side effects?
No, not one.
Okay.
Not one, not a thing.
Did you manage to...
No nausea, no sickness, no palpitations or anything. I mean, I had a quadruple bypass about 20 years ago in January there it was, with a heart condition, but that was nothing to do with it, you know what I mean?
Mhm. And what about sleeping? Did you sleep any better when you started on LDN?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
I'd be honest, I couldn't say it, but it is this spasticity.
Right.
It's spasticity that keeps me awake.
Mhm.
You know, it really. If I'm at home and I'm sitting watching television and I can get up and down in the intervals or move around, I go and make a cup of tea, or my wife makes a cup of tea or something. The spasticity is not bad, but I mean, we went out for a meal the other evening. My daughter took us out, and I had to sit for 2 hours solidly. And that night, I didn't get a wink of sleep. It just, you know, it's purely the spasticity that is driving me up the wall.
Mhm. What would you say to other people who are thinking of trying LDN?
Have a go. I say have a go at anything. I'm a great believer in anything that works for you. I say that seriously. I had a very good doctor friend who had a son with terrible asthma, and he could get nothing for it, and he took him to one of these faith healers, and it worked. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Just something works for someone somewhere. So I would say definitely have a go.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Not at all.